Time, weather, and
Always 13 p.m.
various.
96 ZFB.
This is Radio VSB at 1450 at the top of the dial.
Good day and welcome to another edition of AirWaves, the program that highlights the people and personalities of radio and television broadcasting in Bermuda over the last several decades. Broadcasting has had a myriad of talents enter the industry, but today we welcome none other than Mike Bishop, veteran of radio and TV, also a professional magician. Hey Mike, how you doing?
Well, nice to see you.
All right, it's I guess what categorizes veteran. I'm going to say 30 years.
Right. A long time.
30 years.
A long time, I think is what
Nice to
that
have
is.
you here on the program
Thank
today. And I get the feeling that you were watching Space Ghost on television when I was watching it, right?
Yeah, I kind of grew up being a TV kid. I don't know if you've ever seen the program. It was on years ago on HBO where the opening credits was a little kid sitting looking at the television screen. That was me.
That was you.
Yeah.
I same here.
Yeah.
I was a Hanna-Barbarian at heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, but radio was really my first love. That was where I started. I'd always wanted to fly. That was I wanted to be a pilot. And
Another pilot.
Al can sympathize with this. So that's really
pilots.
what I wanted to do. But there came
Yeah.
that point at school, in senior school,
Right.
where the counselor said, "Okay, what do you want to do with your life?" And it was fly. And so that's what I was going to do. But up until that time, since 1977, for like 2-year period, I had been working at ZBM part-time
Sort of
for
like,
holidays and what have you.
Right. So how old were you then?
14 going on 15.
Whoa,
Yeah.
okay.
And so I started under the tutelage of people like Leighton Rochester, Shirley Dill.
Right.
I'll get to Shirley in a minute.
Right. What school did you go to, by the way?
I started out at Warwick Academy,
Right.
and then I ended up at Saltus.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
And then, so what happened was I came in on sort of the cusp of the Walter Stasko days. Mr. Stasko was the one that had run ZBM for
Because he
eons.
actually began ZB. He was one of the founders of ZB.
Exactly.
They had a television. Well, I think a television radio back in 1958.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
And then the late Quentin Edness was
Right.
in charge, and so when it came time for me to make my mind up as to what I wanted to do,
Sure.
I was hooked. I was like, I had stars in my eyes, and I did the late night radio shift on the old ZBM1 radio.
ZBM1, that's 12.
It was 12:30.
Yes,
12:30 on the dial.
ZBM1.
Yeah,
I do remember that. Yeah.
And then working opposite me on at the same time in the evening on 1340 radio, which was ZBM2,
1340.
was the late Joe Carvello.
Joe Carvello,
So Joe
yes.
was a great mentor to me. I had so many great people out when I started out, and I'm trying to remember them in some semblance of order
Sure.
to give them credit, because I didn't do it on my own. I had a lot of great help over the years.
And then Everest, of course, did you work
Everest,
with him?
yes, Everest was the program director when I started there at ZBM.
Okay.
But we had people that from the outside now helping me out, like Keith Hart, Ronnie
Right.
Evans.
Right.
Ron Evans used to call me up, sort of any time of the shift that I was on, and
Right.
don't talk over the record, and all the little bits
Because
and pieces that you needed to know.
Ron Evans, he's actually was a part of most of the startups in Bermuda. He was
Yes.
one of ZFB's.
Absolutely.
when
He
first
had
started.
his hand
I
in a lot of
never
pies.
actually met him, but I heard his voice, and I remember he helped Defon's broadcasting there first,
Correct.
right?
Yeah, the basso profundo voice of
Yeah,
Bermuda.
yes.
Yeah.
It was sharp.
So a lot of help along the way. I also had people that would call in that were here on holiday at the time. So I had the Dean of Broadcasters from NBC,
Wow.
who called me up one day and said, "I hope you don't mind, young man, but here's a few pointers." And I was like, "No, please, bring it on."
Yeah.
So I started at ZBM, started on the radio, and I did the late night shift, which is where everybody kind of got their feet wet.
Cut your teeth in
And
broadcasting,
so
yes.
I got into the habit fairly early on from people that had said to me, "Be prepared, that
Right,
you might have to
yes.
suddenly grab a jacket and go and do the night report on television."
The night report.
which was the ZBM 10
You're
o'clock
really dating
report.
yourself,
Yeah, I am
Mike.
dating myself. But at 10 o'clock, no matter what was showing, it could be in the middle of a Mannix episode or whatever happened to be on at the time.
Right.
It stopped, and then the night report came on.
It was like my mother would say, "You better be in the bed before Wilf Davidson comes on."
Yeah, and there's
Yeah.
there's another name from the past. Wilf was just leaving when I started, so the people that were
Right.
actually moving out of the business and retiring when I started were people like Wilf Davidson, who was amazing. He was the one that showed me about back timing voiceovers for commercials, and the fact that you had to kind of be on your game to do that. He was the one-take wonder. He would come in, he would sit and record a commercial just like that, walk out.
So you were now, say, you're out of high school now.
So I'm working there full time. Jane Bainbridge had left.
I remember Jane
Jane was a
Bainbridge,
British girl, woman that worked on the radio.
Right.
She also did the weather on television. People remember her primarily for doing the weather on the big weather board, which was a glass board
with the lipstick.
With the lipstick
Yes,
for Trimminghams.
You were drawing the fronts on like you knew what you were talking about.
And so Jane was leaving. Leighton Rochester was leaving.
Right.
And so I kind of, sort of assumed this position of working in the radio. So I did that for a few years, and then I was also sort of on the periphery of the television stuff.
So you never really went and did any formal, like, for example, like college or like in terms of broadcasting or anything like that?
No, I didn't. Because I was really into the flying thing, that was going to be my career.
And
that was what I was going to pursue.
Right.
And so all this other stuff was sort of in the background.
I actually understand, as a person who trained in flying myself, I know that passion.
Yeah.
And I understand, but it's funny how they both tend to.
Well,
I don't know.
Now I wish in some respects that I had followed that pursuit in some respects, but I've had a great career in broadcasting.
Oh, yeah.
The ZBM gig, I ended up becoming the manager of the radio stations and working again with some amazing people, Gerald Daniels, even James Barnett.
You're calling names that are giving me goosebumps. I mean, it's like as Dennis was a memory bank. A vault of names and people and personalities.
Yeah, well, it's. I think it's important, like as you're coming along, and people, especially with the way the business has changed now.
Yes.
You can do everything in a
bathroom.
Basically a box, and everything, of course, is done on computer.
Sure.
When I think back to working in the radio side of it, and I had Webster B. Tucker, who was amazing.
I remember Webster showed me the Echo box. Do you remember the Echo box? It was like a big wooden box.
Yeah, before we had the computer effects.
Yeah,
it
was like,
do things creatively.
Like,
Ian Marshall, who ran the big recording studio.
Yes, Ian Marshall.
So all the records that were produced, and there were a lot. People don't realize there was probably a good maybe 100 to 150 albums produced in Bermuda with various bands.
That would have been with Edmar Records.
A variety of people. Eddie DeMello had Edmar Records. There were other people that that had their finger in the pie as well.
I understand, because my uncle Stan, recorded all of his records.
Yes.
There. So you basically dealt with mostly the analog technology, the reel-to-reel tapes, splicing block.
So you had to learn
razor
how
blade.
To do you had to learn how to do all that.
I just find it amazing that I can't even remember. Like, if I had to go back to that now, I don't know if I'd be lost.
It's again, it gave you a good grounding for what was for me to come later in my career.
Sure.
So while I was there at ZBM, I had the opportunity of being their outside broadcast announcer for all the special events.
I found a picture of you in my collection. I think you had a CBS cap on. You were doing a remote somewhere.
One of them.
yeah.
But Shirley Dill was the one that very kindly got me into that.
Right.
I first met Shirley. I did a Bermuda Today episode.
That was in the afternoon.
It came on at 6:30
before the news.
Yes, in the version that I was on with her. And I was doing my magic at the time, so she had me on as a budding magician. At, I think 13 years old, actually.
Wow!
So that was my first encounter with Shirley, and then she was one of my greatest champions for my career. She was the one that said to the management, "Look, he's going to go off and fly planes if you don't get him to come and work here full time."
Yeah.
And all of that. So she was very good. But she was also the one that said, when somebody said, we need somebody to go out and do the outside broadcast remote for such and such.
Right.
And Shirley was the one, well, there you go.
There you go. Yeah.
Off you go.
I remember, I don't know if you remember, obviously you weren't there, but you remember the old Continental Cookery with Neil Hansford Smith.
Yes.
And there was the other show, Health and Fitness with Vicki Jensen.
So Vicki, we can get to that in when we talk about VSB. But Vicki ended up doing some health and fitness segments for us. We did a segment with Neil through another company that Hugh and Dale Lewis had set up.
Right.
And they revived that show later on in time. But yeah, all those programs, and they were all done live. For the most part. There was also a gentleman called Mr. Fix-It, who many people may or may not remember. All those shows had a place in the history of the broadcast media here.
You remember watching the ZBM News, and the guy used to ride in on a tricycle sometimes, or he had one of those bouncy things?
Yeah, so we worked with a lot of characters, or at least I did in my early days, because we still had broadcasters from Canada who all they really did was come in and read the news. So we had people like Mark Blackburn. We had Larry Berner. Now Larry did a very funny piece. Actually, they both did back in the days when, as I say, you could get away with this. Larry's one was one Halloween, starting the newscast with just sort of hair appearing on the back of his hands. And by the end of the newscast, he was a full-blown werewolf. But he didn't say a word. He just went ahead and did it. Mark's one was a prank that Ralph Gibson and the crew pulled on
Ralph
him.
Gibson, yes. He had a brother as well, worked in there?
Yes, and you put me on the spot because I can't remember I didn't work so much with him. I worked a lot with Ralph.
Ralph. I remember.
But Mark was doing the news, and it was his birthday, and he came to the end of the news, and he signed off, and they didn't cut him off deliberately. And so he had to literally, he sank below the news desk to crawl off, and they did it purposely because he used to come in from the beach to read the news, and all you saw was from here up. But he used to wear shorts and sandals.
Oh yeah, I think a lot of people did.
Yeah, so they got him on that one. But we had a lot of fun, and we also learned a lot as well. We had people that came through that were willing to share.
Right. Before we take the break, did you ever get into any E&G at ZBM?
No, I never, Al, I never was in the news per se. Even when I moved on to VSB, I was never involved with the news gathering side of the business. I did a lot of interviews for them in terms of entertainment pieces, but I never did the actual.
Yeah, that's a kind of a separate discipline in a way. I mean,
and there were some amazing people that did it. I mean, when I first started at ZBM, we had a guy that used to work pretty much all overnight called Percy Ball. Percy was the one that used to grab the stuff off the old telex machines and write all the news up for the next morning.
Thumper.
Yeah. I was there the night that John Lennon was shot, and the telex machine used to have an alarm on it that,
the bell
that used to ring. And people that had passed away that were of note, they used to sort of alarm you to that.
Yeah, we actually had one in when I was in college. We called it a thumper, AP machine. So and then had a bell. It actually had a binder if it was a nuclear attack, what you were supposed to do.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
We didn't have quite that, but we did have our hurricane preparedness book.
Sure. So. Well, I'll tell you what, Mike, we're going to take a quick break now.
All right.
And when we come back, we're going to have more conversation with Mike Bishop. Stay with us.
Hello, Bermuda. I am Kiona Balboder, Manager of Aging and Disability Services for the Ministry of Health. I'm here to provide Bermuda's seniors with advice regarding COVID-19, otherwise known as the novel coronavirus. Older adults and people with severe chronic medical conditions like heart, kidney, or lung disease or diabetes are at higher risk for illness from COVID-19. Seniors should take the following precautions to reduce their risk of getting sick with the disease. Clean your hands often, distance yourself from others, delay traveling abroad, practice good hygiene in public spaces, clean and disinfect your home, have supplies on hand, have a plan for if you get sick, watch for symptoms and emergency warning signs such as fever, cough, shortness of breath, and runny nose. And finally, if you do get sick, you should stay at home and call your doctor. Do not go to the hospital unless your doctor advises it. Keep your family and friends informed of how you are doing. Take Tylenol or paracetamol to reduce your fever. Thank you. Stay informed to stay well.
This is a message from the government of Bermuda.
And welcome back to AirWaves, a look at the people and personalities of broadcasting in Bermuda. And we are talking with Mike Bishop, extraordinary broadcaster. I can say that, you know. I think you're right.
Thank you for saying it. Yeah.
No,
Checks in the mail.
Yeah, right. So we spoke in the last segment about ZBM and some of
Right.
your earliest forays into the broadcasting industry.
Right.
And we all know that in 1981, Kennedy Font started VSB.
Correct.
The voice of independent radio in Bermuda.
Yeah.
Remember that? Yeah, on 4050 AM. I even did a short stint there as a summer student
Right.
back in 1983. But tell me, when did you join VSB Radio?
So just to sort of segue into that,
Sure.
before I left ZBM, I decided that I was going to go seek my fame and fortune in Hollywood.
Hollywood.
And so I went out to Los Angeles,
Right.
and I spent pretty much a whole year there exploring my possibilities. And one of the radio interviews that I had done when I was at ZBM was with a singer from the 1950s called Frankie Lane.
Frankie Lane.
Now, Frankie Lane was the
Yes.
guy that did the TV theme songs for Rawhide, and but he had a huge number of hits
Right,
in the 50s
right.
on radio. And I'd been very friendly with him, and I went to lunch with him, and he said, "What on earth are you doing here in this rat race?" He said, "You come from a beautiful island. Why don't you do something back home relating to television?" Because
Sure.
I'd felt I'd kind of, with the radio here, kind of
Kind of ran its course,
Yeah.
so to speak. Yeah.
so, and this was prior to VSB, sort of
Right,
starting up.
right.
So he said, "Look, I'll get you to go to watch the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. I'll get you in there as many times as you want to go and see it. I think you should go back and do a Tonight Show type of program in Bermuda." So he was friends with Fred DeCordova, who was Johnny Carson's producer.
Right.
And sure enough, I went and saw the Tonight Show, I can't tell you how many times, and picked up how they were doing the production. And
Right.
everything was like clockwork. I mean,
Right.
it was absolutely
I mean, it's
amazing
live.
to see.
It was
Well,
live.
they recorded it to tape.
Oh, they did?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, so
they
it was
recorded
recorded
it
early
at
in the day.
5:30.
Yeah,
but
like
it was done as live, and just
Right,
an amazing.
right.
Everyone knew their places and what they were doing and the whole
Sure.
bit. So I came back and I started a show called On Tonight, which had kind of, I called it the Poor Man's Tonight Show. It was,
Well, you know how I remember it.
you were a guest.
was on it.
Yes, Al was a guest. He
And
was his
shaking,
cartoonist.
shaking in my boots.
Well, we used to fly. We used to fly in a celebrity as often as we
Right,
could
right.
to sort of augment the local angle of it. Joe Wiley was my musical
Joe Wiley,
director.
yes, the Joe Wiley trio.
We had a trio.
I see it. That's sort of like with the, not Jay Leno, not the CBS. He's a throw stuff on David Letterman.
Yes, well,
Throws-
so those guys were kind of like my inspiration. My biggest mentor, who became a mentor, but also my biggest inspiration, as a lot of people know now, is Bob Barker.
Bob
I
Barker,
first met
that's
Bob when I met him when I first went out to Hollywood.
Sure.
And he just was a terrific guy, and he wanted me to learn as well. And he gave me so many pieces of advice and pointers, and over the years he's just been a great
Right,
sort of
right.
friend and ally. So I came back, did this program, and then I just got burnt out because I was, you know what it's like in this business.
Oh,
you,
yeah.
You
Oh,
basically end up doing everything. And so I did that for 2 years, and then I decided I'm going to take a break. So I went to work for the Bermuda Sun. They were just introducing the Cablevision guide because
Right,
cable
right.
was brand new.
Right.
And so I-
86. Because cable,
About that,
I think cable
85,
came in
86,
86. Yeah.
So got that launched for them, and in the meantime, VSB is doing its thing.
Right.
And I was working for Defense Broadcasting on their tourism radio station, sort of as a fun thing to do, really.
That's right.
They had it at the old Bermudiana Hotel.
So what station was that actually on?
That was on 1160.
That's right,
And
before
Carol
the-
Marshall
right.
worked on that station.
That was before the BBC?
Yes.
Before
yeah.
that, okay,
And so
gotcha.
we used to do the mornings there
My gosh, you're
from the
bringing back
Bermudiana
memories.
Hotel lobby, which was
Yeah.
great. We had a little studio there, and people used to come through. It subsequently moved to the ferry terminal
Right.
for the visitor information, where DeAngelini's little
Right.
sort of cafe place is now. So anyway, moving on to VSB, I ended up going in to VSB really in a sort of roundabout way. I worked for a company that was doing interactive video sales. We used to have kiosks at the cruise terminals, the airport, the old naval base, etc.
Right.
And so we had a lot of video material, and when that sort of was drying up, with, oh, well, what can we do next? And the guy that owned the company said to me, he said, well, you used to do that nighttime thing. He says, why don't you do a TV show, and then we'll get the local advertising. So we came up with Bermuda Sunrise, which was a Monday to Friday, 7 to 8:30 live program. And I don't know what I was thinking at the time when I thought I'd do it.
Yeah, because I joined VSB in '91. I was at ZBM, and part-time. And I think when the recession hit, they were making some cuts.
Right.
And they let me go, so I was out of the industry until June, when I went to see Kenny, Mr. DeFonts, and he told me to go up there, and I went up there, and ever since. So we were I was kind of there when, around the same time. Yeah.
You did the evening time. I was getting up at 4:30 in the morning.
Bermuda Sunrise.
So I did that with Shirley Dill. It's so weird how things come full circle. So Shirley was my first choice as the co-host, and she graciously accepted. So the two of us did that. Dennis Sherlock, who I haven't got to yet, but I am now. Dennis is one of my oldest friends. Dennis and I met through the Magic Club.
That's right.
And I was the annoying little kid that used to go into his shop.
I think he showed me a picture. He said, oh, Mike, I know I have this picture. I saw you standing. I said, whoa.
Yeah. I would think I was about 11 or 12 when I used to go into the Family Affair Boutique, is where he and his wife June had their store in the Cedar Parkade.
Yeah.
And so then when we started doing the morning show, it was like, okay, how are we going to do this? And we had to be very, very tight with our budget. So we had to film like a week's worth of material. For instance, we used to do segments on the National Trust and the cooking show with Fred Ming. And
I remember the exercise show down at Old Boys Point.
Yes, absolutely, with the athletic club.
And we used to, that early in the morning?
Yeah, we used to do all these segments, but we used to film them all in bulk, as it were. And Dennis was a star. I mean, he and I used to finish up at 8:30. We would have our cup of coffee, and then we'd be out on the road till like 4 in the afternoon. I couldn't do it now. I mean, it really was one of those younger men's sort of pursuits. And I couldn't have done it, to be honest with you, and I haven't mentioned this yet. You know, they say behind every good man's work, etc., is a good woman. With me, it was my wife, Julia, and sadly she passed away in 2012. But she was the one that said, come on, you can do this. You can go out there and, you know, maybe she just wanted to be out of the house, but it was like, you know, go and do these things.
Yeah, we were all part of, I mean, I was bringing up children when we were running around, you know, and but I look back and it's like, those were some of the greatest times.
We had fun. I mean, as much hard work as it was, and it was, because we didn't usually finish until like about 11 at night, doing what we had to do, editing and all the rest of it, and then be up for 4:30 the next morning. But we had fun doing it. We did it 7 days a week. We did it the best we could under the circumstances we were presented in terms of equipment and etc.
Because that hadn't been done since Good Morning Bermuda
with Marlene Landy and Winston Jones.
Yes,
absolutely.
I still remember the music. Good Morning Bermuda. That was a John White production, wasn't it? Didn't he got behind it?
He might have had something to do with
it.
Because
I know
he sang it.
I think he sang the song for it. Yeah. Good Morning Bermuda.
But we had a great time doing it, and then when that sort of ran its course, then we used to do an evening show with Shirley once again, called Inside Bermuda. And we used to have varying, and I'm very glad we did that, because we ended up with a lot of people who sadly are no longer with us. But they gave us kind of what we're doing now, sort of the rundown on what they did in their lives. And I think it's very important to preserve things like that. Not necessarily me.
No, I know what you mean, because we're like, we're still passing through. And that's, I think, for me personally, that's the reason behind this program. All the names that you've mentioned that people are going to hear and remember.
And I apologize, because I know I've forgotten some individuals' names.
It's almost impossible. But I'm gonna, at some point we will actually scroll, like particularly putting people's names in certain programs so we can remember them, even people that go back. I mean, remember my mother said there was a guy, Wakey Smith.
Yes, I vaguely remember him in the morning. David Lopes will tell you more about that.
I asked him one day. But
I mean, at VSB, for instance, like the way that I sort of transitioned back into radio was kind of unusual, because then I was doing all the television stuff.
Sure.
And bless him, Dudley Brown passed away.
Yes.
And there was a void there to run the radio station. So Phil Stevenson was a guy who came in and did that for a time. And then when Phil left, I ended up running both the radio and the TV.
I think during the 90s, particularly when VSB and ZBM were in sort of vigorous competition, that was the height of the energy. I mean, we were doing
yeah.
the impossible with
Yeah.
with you know.
Well, I remember a guy came down that used to do all of our technical work. He was an ex-CBS engineer.
Sure.
And he used to say to us, he said, "You guys are spinning gold out of straw," basically. And, you know, with no sort of disrespect to what we were given to as
Exactly.
tools, it just was what we had to work with at the time. But you had to be creative and inventive.
Yeah.
And that's where the background of being able to do some of these things at a cost-effective way
Sure.
worked. You know?
Yeah, and we worked in an analog situation,
Right.
and the timing of everything. I mean, the changes that came about like at the end of the '90s into the 2000s,
Right.
sort of was I wouldn't say the death knell, but things were changing rapidly.
Yeah.
I don't think we could ever go back to.
No, and I'm very
No.
grateful, Al, for people like yourself. You did the news for all those years, behind
stock report.
behind the scenes. You know, Nicholas Cumber, who we both worked with at VSB.
Yeah.
You know, these guys really, again, it was a passion and
Yeah.
it was a calling. Kenny Harris, who we both worked with.
Kenneth Harris,
I
yeah.
worked with him in two situations, once
Yeah.
at ZBM, once at VSB.
Yeah. You mentioned Carol Marshall.
Carol Marshall, yes, who's now living in the
We
States.
could be here for another hour just calling
Yes, I
names.
get
We actually have about 2 minutes left. I tell you
All
what,
right.
I met Tom Pettit. You know Tom Pettit
Yes.
from NBC. He came to VSB one time. And he said, "Never before have I seen so many people do so much with so little in such a small space."
And just to put him into context,
Yeah.
Tom was another great sort of ally of mine and very
Right.
good mentor.
Right.
He was the one in the Lee Harvey Oswald film.
Yeah,
that's actually stood there
Right.
when Harvey Oswald got shot in Dallas.
Yeah, because I asked him, I said to him, "What's your highlight of your career?" He says, "Well, I don't know if it was a highlight, but I was
He was
standing
there.
He said, "I was standing next to Jack Ruby."
Yeah, I'm
And I was
very,
like,
very grateful
wow.
for the people that I've met. Your dad was an amazing person to work with back in the
Sure.
day, and all these individuals who, I think it was, you know, it's a team effort. It has to be a team effort, and it was just an amazing experience.
I just find it important that a program like this, and even wants to follow, can outlive us. And with the digital technology and the cloud, this stuff will be up there forever.
Yeah, sadly, I've
And
been
it's-
talking to you folks for the next 50 years. But
Yeah,
there we go.
next 100, as long as we have
Absolutely.
electricity, right?
Yes, that's right.
But I'm actually glad you came by.
Thank you
we
for
worked at
asking me.
VSB right up until.
I was there until 2012, until my wife took ill, and then I
Right,
gave it,
right.
had to give it up.
Yeah.
And I didn't go back into it full time. I now
Right.
host pub quiz nights,
That's right.
nights 4
And,
nights a week.
Well, I hope.
So-
I mean, we're just about out of time, but I actually hope that you get to fly. I mean,
Well,
I
thank
try.
you. Yes.
Maybe we'll be sitting left and right seat. I don't know who's going to have the left, who's going to have the right. But
Well, there you
well, we fly in life anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Al.
Thanks for
Pleasure.
being here. All right,
Thank you
we
for
may have
asking.
you back at some point. Well, that's it for this edition of AirWaves. Glad you could join us, and we look forward to bringing you many more personalities from Bermuda's great broadcasting history here in our studio. For CITV, I'm Al Seymour.
Time, weather, and
Always 13 to the end.
the very